name's Paul Boyer. Welcome. Since we're historians, I'll begin with 2 minutes of history. In 1927, Chicago Mayor William Hale Thompson, known as Big Bill Thompson, ordered a recently published American history book to be publicly burned on the steps of the Chicago Public Library. The book was New Viewpoints in American History by Arthur M. Schlesinger, Sr. Thompson charged that the book was tainted with treason. Schlesinger Sr. told me the story.
Ladies and gentlemen, Oxford University Press is having an author signing with Richard Kirkendall from 332 on this book, The OAH and the Writing and Teaching of American History. Please drop by booth 316 to meet the author and grab a signed copy. Thank you.
Anyone would like to leave for this book signing? Really paid for that. Well, anyway, Arthur Schlesinger told me that story years ago, and of course now the story has become sort of part of the lore of our history profession. But 2 years before that, in 1925, the Texas Textbook Commission, under Governor Miriam Ma Ferguson, banned all high school science textbooks that taught the theory of evolution. Any teacher who used such textbooks was subject to prosecution and dismissal. Here we are, 80 plus years later, and the issue of textbook censorship is still with us, wrapped within the larger question of who should decide the pedagogical content of textbooks in the public schools: authors, publishers, state education officials, local school boards, or individual teachers. This issue has recently become intensely contentious right here in Texas because of efforts by the State Board of Education to mandate the content of public school textbooks, including American history textbooks. Since Texas is such a big adoption state, the issue has national ramifications. Today we want to explore this issue and its larger implications for historians, for public education, and perhaps especially for what it tells us about our contemporary civic culture. And we have an outstanding panel to do just that. Each panelist will initially speak for 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll be timekeeper, waving a little card. Then we'll go to general discussion among the panel, exploring the issues that have been raised, and then I promise we'll leave time for questions and brief comments from the audience. We begin with 3 historians who teach here in the state and have first-hand knowledge of the specific situation here. We'll then broaden the focus with a panelist from Minnesota who's confronted similar issues, and conclude with a veteran textbook writer who will offer some more general perspectives. And the first speaker is Rebecca Goetz. She's an assistant professor of history at Rice University here in Houston. She received her PhD from Harvard in 2008. A historian of early North America, and especially religion and race in the early Chesapeake, she's had several essays in print and forthcoming, and is working on a book manuscript on how the early English settlers understood the religious capacities, the souls of Indians and Africans. And I can add that in the email session, the email before the session, Rebecca wrote me, "I think I'm on this panel because I work in Texas. I teach the kids who have gone through the state public school system, and I grew up in a small town in Texas and watched local versions of this fight. And lastly, I've commented frequently and crankily about it in the news media."
I have indeed commented frequently and crankly about textbooks and curriculum and these kinds of issues in the news media, and I've been doing it since I was about senior year in high school, the school board there decided that it was going to remove certain books from the 8th English reading list. Remarkably, all the books they selected except for one were by non-white authors. And then the local newspaper upped the ante by taking the objectionable excerpts from these various books and publishing them, very much from their context. The resulting explosion is very interesting. But in the end, the Roundabout School Board decided not to remove those books from the curriculum. I think the first point that I would like to make is that these kinds of ructions have been happening in the state of Texas for quite some time. They've just been happening at the local level, at the local board level. And so we don't see it happening in the national media. So those of us who are familiar with Texas, have lived in Texas for a while, when this particular controversy over social studies curriculum in textbooks started, I just kind of raised my eyebrow and said, oh really? Again? Because the whole story was very familiar to me. But what it also told me is that because many of the groups who push these kinds of changes were not successful at the local level, that they started to push it at the state level, where for a variety of reasons it became slightly easier for them. What has interested me about this controversy, and what I've tried to say as I've commented frequently and frankly in the media, what I've tried to do is not engage in the particulars